Hi, and welcome back to Comics from the Art, where we discuss the weekly pulls that Devin and I are fascinated with for the week of July 24th, 2024. Howdy, howdy.
Last week.
I know, that's what we have.
But yeah, we're just running late is my point.
Yeah, we're recording this late. This is after the 24th, but
Jeff's
still
fault.
before the next load of comics come in, so,
Still Jeff's fault.
within the time frame. Anywho,
Jeff's fault. Anyway.
I'll take that one. All right. So, I guess in the meantime, before we get into comics, anything new coming in the store?
Well, Sam Jones, 1 week from today. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that a lot. I've been answering a pretty large amount of questions, and I'm kind of surprised by the response we're getting, considering if you look up where we're recording from on a regular basis, we ain't exactly big city out here.
No, that's
yeah.
I will confirm that.
Yeah, I think we're rocking 750 people in town.
Woo!
Yeah, smallest town to have a comic book store, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, he's
That
gonna
would be an
here.
interesting little statistic to look up.
That would be a curious. I'm sure there's one out there. It's probably like a town of like 3 people, and they just own the comic book store or something.
They also call that the community center.
Yeah, right. In the dining room and the living room and the
Oh, I've been to comic book stores like that, and I'm too polite to mention names, but there was one guy who had it in his apartment, and there were a couple of times where he would not fully dress when he would come out.
just kind of like robe hanging open and everything.
Kind of, yeah. He kept everything in the bedroom or the storeroom or whatever of his apartment, and he would just bring it out in the living room, and then you would flip through stuff, and if you were looking for something particular, you had to ask, because it wasn't.
You're not using comics as a way to talk about drugs, right? Because
No.
that's what this sounds like. Is some sort of weird backroom drug
Well,
deal.
it technically it was my drug of choice, was
I know,
comic books.
but you know what I'm saying? I mean, you have to go to the place where the guy has the robe hanging open. He's got to go to the back room to get the box so you can dig through and find the stuff you want. This is not sounding really above board, man.
I think you also know the proprietor of said business.
I have no. I actually am. I can guess. That being said, even without knowing that knowledge, this still sounds like
So anyway,
sounds like
yeah,
a bad meth deal, man.
our choices have been limited in this region. We went from one place to another, and then to yet another, and
Well, there was always a city because I mean, let's be honest. When you live out in the small towns out here, you at least once a month go into either Des Moines or Omaha. So, you know, but um, and they sport some pretty large shops. I mean,
oh yeah, I mean they're decent places out there to
yeah,
be had. It's just I didn't want to have to drive an hour plus to get my comics,
yeah.
and I wasn't a huge fan of waiting monthly and getting it all at once, because usually how that played out then was a week later I've read everything, and then it's like, okay, now I have to wait another 3 weeks to get the next batch of comics.
Yeah.
On that note, I actually had done mail ordered subscription from one place until they closed up shop, and they recommended people, like, okay, we're closing up and selling our steaks over to this other mail order place, and we recommend that you use them, but don't feel like you have to on our behalf. And so then I switched to that other place, and I was content for what it was.
Well,
But then
I
you
mean,
posted
there's a
on
lot of
Facebook, you posted the
yeah.
the issue of Daredevil #1, and I was out here in a heartbeat thinking, oh my god, there's a comic book
Well,
store. And 3 hour conversation later, I dropped my mail ordered subscription, and I was the first subscriber here.
Yep. Well, and what's interesting to me is we had the mail order possibility in the 1980s. In fact, I remember being able, you could do it from, don't get me wrong, it was your what is now corporate comics that were doing it at the time, but you had that a bit availability because you had a lot of small town America getting into the comics in general, especially through the 1980s and early 90s because you had all the stuff going on. You had the Hulk out of off the TV from a TV show from the 1970s. You had a ton of things that kind of had comic-y feels, like A-Team, stuff like that going on. And then of course going into the Michael Keaton Batmans. So kind of like it is now, back then the comic phenomena had spread well beyond the cities and into small town America because it was getting into the newspapers and so on and so forth. The difference is this time it really got into the social media and the movies and stuff, and so
Oh yeah,
I think we're
I
seeing
had
another resurgence of the mail order
well,
system.
and before mail order, I did subscription, and
Yeah,
so they would essentially send it with a flimsy piece of cardboard and the same baggy that you would have like your ladies' home journal or whatever come
yeah,
in the mail, and so it wasn't a snug fit. It was just this loose bag that your comic
good
and
luck.
backer would,
Yeah,
but occasionally, with the mail and these being sent individually, it got bent or it would be beaten up or the plastic would get torn and
well, and the problem with the subscription, even back then, and this is why the mail order kicked off then and why it has again now, is okay, cool. You do a subscription. Okay, well, I've got one to Marvel. Now I've got one to DC. Ah, crap. Well, what about First Comics? Do they offer a subscription, or do I need to go find that somewhere else? What about Dark Horse? And I'm kind of naming the ones that I was getting into back in the 80s and 90s, of course. But you had to find your LCS or a actual mail order system to be able to get into like those books.
well, and there were times where when I was in high school I was out for cross country and then or football and then cross country, and whenever we would have competitions in like Council Bluffs, we would always stop by the mall to get food at the food court and what have you. And I remember on more than one occasion, the money that I took for food, I would run in and go to Walden Books
Mm-hmm.
instead, and I would buy, two or three comics that, either I found that I needed and didn't have, or it was when my subscription lapsed and I didn't get the payment in for the next batch, and so I had to get fillers until the subscription kicked back up.
Yeah,
And so I was buying comic books with my supper money while I was on cross country trips. Then
yeah.
that was what I did on the way home instead of eating was I would end up reading Excalibur and X-Men classics. And
See, and I grew up actually town very similar size as where we're at now, and so we'd go into Cheyenne, out in Wyoming, once a week, because you had to get groceries, you had to, get all your stuff, and so it was a Sunday trip, and part of that for me was luckily at the time there was a place called Comic Quest in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it was I think the existence of that store is probably one of the reasons I really was able to get involved in the books because she carried all the independents. She did it for the love of the books and had a just wonderful little store, um, and that was where I was first introduced to my first hold box. I was like, I can just tell you what I want and you'll put it. Really? And it was just eye opening for me. How it could work. Especially if you got away from the corporate stuff. And so yeah, I think a lot of what you're starting to see again. Yet again, you're going back to that feel. Even some of your larger stores in the city are trying to regain that feel that there was in the late 80s, early 90s, where it was not a speculator market like what we've been dealing with for a few years here, especially with the COVID jump and all that stuff, but more of a actual love of the books, the stories, celebration of the writers, and being able to collect for wanting to collect, not because you feel that this is going to be the next big book. And like we were talking earlier, I think one of the places that really stands out is I'm starting to see more and more people getting into the horror series, and not like mainline horror, where it's like following a single thing, like Tomb, or something like that. More like your House of Secrets or House of Mystery. I know there was a couple of them from Marvel that were pretty similar, but it was just like good writing, good kind of suspense thrillers, and you're starting to really see those take off now because I think people are getting back into the books for the love of the books now.
Well, and I still think that the big push that we had in the comic industry and the movies, that may have brought people in, and at first, you had everybody who was trying to get the first appearance or the storyline where such and such happened. And after reading these things, you're like, okay, I like the medium. I forgot how this felt to have the book in my hand, and we've got the initial blow up because of that, and then people started to fall into more of a routine, and then started seeking out what they wanted to buy.
Well, and your audience definitively goes down during this time, during this part of the cycle, but at the same time you're selling pretty much the same amount of books because the ones that are really holding on, that are getting into everything else, they're really wanting to enjoy it, and so they're immersing themselves completely into the world.
Right. Well, and my best example is right before Captain Marvel came out in movie theaters. I bought Miss Marvel #1, and at the time it was more from a not quite speculator, but it was kind of one of those things where if this movie takes off,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to pay an outrageous amount later if I decide that I do want to read it. It's kind of
Well,
fear of missing out type.
yeah.
And so I picked up my copy for $17,
Hmm.
which it's about fine condition, and
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Not bad, and then the book did shoot up, and I read it, and I'm like, actually, this is a good story. I like this, and there were things that I didn't know that the character had gone through. I didn't know that early in her career she had amnesia, and so when she was Miss Marvel, she didn't know that she was Carol Danvers, and when she went back to being Carol Danvers, she was just equally as like, God, I don't know who this Miss Marvel is. I don't want to miss her,
Yeah.
and I was intrigued by that. So then I bought the next couple of issues to finish up that storyline, and then it was like, okay, well now we're getting into this, and I started really enjoying it, and it stopped being that
Well,
fear of missing out. Now it's I have to have it all.
that was the run, if I remember right, that had my favorite costume for her in it. The black one with the red sash.
Yep,
So.
good old Dave Cockrum design.
I I don't know why. It was just simplistic and fun, and I always like. Maybe that's where McFarlane pulled his capes from because that sash got out of control on a regular basis. If you think about it.
It really did. But if you look at Dave Cockrum also designed the Phoenix outfit, and that also had the sash.
But the tail of that didn't get out of control
No.
the same as the Miss Marvel one did.
But if you look at some of his designs, like he did all the billowy capes, that would go from the wrist in, like on Storm.
Yeah. Oh, he
And
would have
then
never got along with Edna.
right, and then you had the sash. I mean, he had a couple of go-to style elements that he liked, but he still did a really good job making this different from that and so forth. There was a cookie cutter.
They need to. Completely off topic here, but they really do need to introduce a character in the Marvel universe that's basically Edna.
Actually, in Amazing Spider-Man, they did have this old Jewish tailor who would sit there and he did the costumes for superheroes, and then Spidey would always go in. It's like, I need your help, and the guy would be all, this is horrible. Who designed this? And he's like, I did. And so they would sit there and play with that, and sometimes there was like a waiting area, and so like while Spidey's waiting, Ben Grimm's in there, getting
Yeah.
measured or
What
whatever.
new shorts?
Yeah.
You know.
I
But
think this was during his pants and boots.
during that time, okay. Well, and I guess the bigger thing needs I should say on it then is because I didn't realize that actually existed, but they need to address that more often because I mean,
Oh, it'd be wonderful.
yeah,
It'd bring a human element to it.
mm-hmm. That well, not even just a human element, but realizing that the person that passed you the ball is, before you made the basket is just as important as you making the basket.
Uh,
The assist counts.
right, right. That actually reminds me, right at the Heroes Reborn
Mm-hmm.
era of Avengers,
Mm-hmm.
they had this backup where they had Jarvis answering letters, and he was trying to basically they were doing exposition,
Mm-hmm.
and it was through Jarvis. But one of the things that no, actually, it was after the heroes had died, but before Heroes Return.
Okay.
He was talking about keeping the manor up to date, what have you, and someone's like, the heroes aren't here, but yet you keep the fridge stocked, and
Mm-hmm.
you do all these things around here, and Jarvis explained that he can't lift cards or juggle planets or anything like that, but he can make the job easier for those that do,
Mm-hmm.
and he does his part so that they could focus on this other thing, and he's doing his contribution, and
And that's exactly what I'm
and
talking about. Yeah.
and it was such a beautiful moment where he's like, and I will be ready for when they return, because I'm sure that
Mm-hmm.
they will return. So his faith and dedication was great. And can you imagine what it would have been like for these heroes returning if the Mandarin had fallen on hard times or got boarded up? It's like, God, I just get back and now I'm having to fight for food or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I got moldy cottage cheese. Lovely.
Yeah, you never see that. You never see
Yeah.
Tony Stark go, "Oh God, this Chinese back."
Yeah. But no, it's like I said, I think we're starting to see, where this started. We're starting to see a shift in the
And
collecting
the
world.
demographic.
Yeah, well, not even just demographics, just in the collecting world in general. Magazines are starting to, be a little bit more important, especially, um, yet again, getting into kind of your horrors and stuff like that. Like your sagas and, um, what was the Frankenstein's Castle? I think
Stuff
is
like
one
that,
of them.
yeah.
There's one of them that's yeah, but the stuff that has all the Harryhausen type stuff in it. So, but anyway, speaking of that, that's kind of the direction I went actually with my book too. Mangoat and Bunnyman is back out, and I can't pass that up. It's yet again a really good story. They were in the first run. I mean, it was definitely, they were all about, trying to get it as often as they could, stuff like that. It's all about, babes and beer. And so, this one they're starting to do a little bit more character development, especially with Bunny Man, because he ends up uh, basically adopting a bat squash baby. So they're dealing with bat squatch, and another team shows up, and Bunny Man realizes that basically the reason the bat squatch is all pissed off and trying to guard the area is because there's baby present. And one thing leads to another. Mother gets killed by the infiltrator team that shows up, and they basically they make it real clear that those two are next as soon as they clean up the mess, and they go to burn the nest and everything. And Bunny Man had luckily saved the child, and so the rest of the book is now you've got Bat Squatch as part of the group, and it's a baby. So
So what's the breakdown on that? Is it just a Sasquatch with bat wings, or
they haven't fully touched on it. I mean, the whole book is just like demon this, demon that. And so they haven't got completely into the power outside of it. Felt like almost a if Nosferatu was stuck mid change.
Okay.
Go if you go with the can turn into a bat side of the house, which I know that was a later ad, blah 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 blah. Yeah, okay, y'all can light me up on that one, whatever. But eventually, vampires started turning into bats, and yes, it wasn't Nosferatu nor their early, black and white, silent or anything like that, which is an excellent movie, by the way. Um, but like, if you imagine getting mid transformation, where you've got, the full kind of humanoid form, but you're still maintaining the wings and the very spindly, and spindly appendages and claws and stuff. That's kind of where they're going with it. So
Hmm.
I don't know why they picked the name they did. Outside of it, kind of rolls off the tongue, fairly decent. And I think Batman and Batboy had already been taken, and Man Bat, and in all actuality, looks a lot like Man Bat.
I'm just wondering how many others of those that you could do. Like, can you do like a Jack-a-blob or a Mama Lope, or
Well, they have one of the protagonists in this one uh, um, is a pig demon, basically.
Okay.
It's yet again.
My ex-wife is in it. No.
Yeah. You're starting to see a lot more in books. And I mean, obviously, just by the name of the book, Mangoat and Bunnyman, it's going to be there. That anthropomorphic. I think I've got the right one there.
Anthropomorphic.
Anthropomorphic. Thank you. Um, going type feel going on, and that really stands out with the Pigman, because I mean, maintains far more of the hog side versus transfer, bringing it to human. It's like more of just an upright hog that is pretty much beating things down. So, but yeah. Um, and that's pretty much the book is Bunny Man taking care of Bat Squatch, and the end of it is basically turned into one of those cliffhangers as normal. They're trapped, and basically they're being told we're either going to kill you or take you back to where you belong, because you work for us, being part of the set of demons, etc. And so you pretty much know that Bat Squatch is going to do something at the beginning of the next book and save the day. And so I'm waiting to see, the power, like you were saying, the power set that it gets involved there.
Is it the same creative team that did the previous run? Or do you know?
I usually don't pay that close of attention. However, I believe it is because everything feels very similar.
Okay, fair
Um,
enough. So it's more of the same if you enjoyed the first.
Yeah, it really is. It's just continuing the storyline. It seems like the way they're going with Mangoat and Bunnyman is more of the direction of like Hellboy, where you have a lot of little minis here and there.
Okay.
Instead of like an ongoing series that you'd have.
Wait until you actually
like
have a story to tell.
or something. Yeah. So it has more of that feel to it, but I can understand why, because when you start getting into a lot of these extra characters they're starting to add, plus the strike team that you're being introduced to and stuff like that, there's definitively some places where you could do some side shoot books on it, and kind of like Hellboy again, because you got Abe Sapien, and he's had his own thing before, and stuff like that. So
very cool.
So yeah, I recommend it definitely. The artwork probably wouldn't be quite your style, but it's definitely up my alley.
Okay.
It's extremely busy on at places. So.
Kind of, yeah, the not angular, but kind of rough sketch style.
It's not the rough sketch. It's the one where they overdo. Like I've heard you talk about, you don't like when everything's overdone, and so they're doing. It's like they stop just shy of the high art, like Xenoscope does. So they're in that little gray area, you
Gotcha.
know. So, but anyway, what did you have this week?
I picked NYX #1. I know, shock. Uh, but I really did enjoy this book. This is after the whole island fell apart. The mutant community didn't all relocate to one area. You know, they kind of broke up and went to different areas. And this is kind of a New York urban offshoot. Yeah, it's like it's a not a suburban community, but it's definitely not New York proper, but one of the other districts,
Yeah.
boroughs. Anyway, we start off with Miss Marvel, who has gone back to her original costume and away from the X-Men interpretation of her costume.
Okay.
And we are going from her perspective, and she's talking about how she's registered at these classes, and it's great that she can now be part of the mutant community and take her classes and still live at home, and she has her friends, she has her family, she has everything in a relatively close area,
Mm-hmm.
and she's talking about balancing life and everything. And on her way to school, she runs into one of the cuckoos, one of the five hive-minded Emma Frost clones.
Yeah.
And so they get to talking about how, they're adjusting to going from this island paradise to this you know, new format of, trying to find a place to live and everything. And they go into class, and Prodigy, who is one of the mutants on the island, is actually the professor of this mutant centric classroom. And he is one of those hoity toity intellectual professor types who wants to make everything seem edgy, gritty. He's trying to paint a picture and basically paint the mutants as being solely the oppressed and what have you. And some of the stuff that he said in there, I read and I'm like, well, that's a bunch of horse crap, or that's not right,
That's not how that played out. Yeah.
and so as he was throwing all of that out, the Stepford cuckoo jumped in and said that is the biggest load of crap, and just ripped into him in front of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And what I could appreciate was the fact that something bad happened to this community, and everybody's going to have their own take on it. But it is refreshing to me that not everyone is viewing it the same way. Some
Yeah.
people are making it a conspiracy. Other people are like, "Hey, it is what it is," and other people were like, "Hey, maybe we had it coming." And everybody has a different take on it, and they're not painting this rosy picture.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there are buildings being destroyed, and it's being blamed on the mutant community.
Yeah.
And Kamala doesn't feel that that's right. Just because we are being relocated doesn't mean that we're going to come in and destroy
Yeah.
the area that we're moving into. And you could almost touch upon immigration
Mm-hmm.
policies and politics, but they don't beat it over the head,
Yeah.
which is good. Again, we're supposed to mirror reality, not sit there and Bible thump or beat you over the head with
Yeah.
the writer's message. Anyway, we have the Cuckoo and Kamala playing off of one another. One's this hoity-toity high lifestyle, and the other one's very down to earth, very dorky, simplistic but not dumb person. And one person wants to do this, and the other person's like, not so much. And there's kind of a dynamic there that they could play off of. I
Mm-hmm.
like how people have a distinct voice. I like how they kept Kamala dorky, fun, and nice, and
Yeah.
just her her profile is very much an open book, except for the whole secret identity thing.
Okay.
As she talked about her secret identity and how it allows her to have a normal life, and being a mutant isn't her entire life. She has other aspects. She has friends. She has interests, And to me, that was a breath of fresh air because outside of Peter Parker, how
Mhm.
often do we see superheroes in their civilian identities?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's getting fewer and fewer.
Um, well, I just out of curiosity, has this title, like even in its previous iterations, always fallen under Marvel? Because for some reason in my brain I keep thinking that there was a non-Marvel side of it at some point because it was like,
There is a non-related NYX book that is put out by an independent company.
mm-hmm.
That came out after the initial run of NYX
Okay,
that introduced us to X-23,
okay.
and there's no affiliation. I'm not sure how they got away with it.
That's what I was kind of wondering about because I hadn't really looked into this before, and so since you picked it, I was gonna bring up the question. Because I'd looked at it, and if I remember right, that offshoot one, it seemed by the cover was like probably not the most kid friendly type book you'd ever want to see.
Right, right. This is not it. That one was put out by Dynamite from 2021 to 2022.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and yeah, I'm just kind of curious how that played. So.
well, anyway, without giving too much away, at the end of the book, the the, the uh, group behind the buildings being demolished is revealed. Is some of the people there I hadn't seen in a while, and I love the fact that someone knew enough of the history that they could bring in some of the characters that really would work in this type of situation.
Ooh, the wrecker.
No, surprisingly not. It was one of those things where, personality wise, it made sense for these people to be in the position that they are in. Um, One thing though, I noticed about this and the Phoenix book that came out last week
Mm-hmm.
is on the last page. There's a QR code, and if you
Okay.
take your phone and take a picture of it and follow the link, it takes you to a bonus page
Okay.
that you can only view online. And so this bonus page gave a snippet of what's to come, and it's completely in left field. You don't recognize any of the characters, and you kind of have this sense of not so much dread, but you can see that things are going to get complicated further on.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how um, it's there. It gives people the ability to feel like they're getting insider information when realistically anyone who gets the book can look it up. I will say though that on this one and the one from Phoenix, though, the one thing that bothers me is when you follow the QR code link, it takes you to a website on the Marvel page,
Yeah.
but you can't blow it up any. And so reading it is very hard because you can't
Oh, like
enlarge it.
if you're on your mobile device,
Right.
basically. Yeah.
So, like, I had to take my glasses off and squint and hold my phone 3 inches from my face, and then I could read it. Um, that is the one downside that I have seen so far for these QR codes.
Well, and which begs the next question I look at here, which is something we've talked about before, is when you start dealing with first appearances in a virtual setting. For example, let's say that in another dimension it's taken until now for Hulk 180 and 181 to come out. Okay, just for hypothetical argument's sake here. And that very last page, instead of it being the last page, was a QR code at the bottom. And the rest of it was an advertisement. And then your bonus was when you hit the QR code, you'd get that last page with, of course, that last panel with Wolverine coming out.
Right.
So what does that do to the book? Because is that QR code going to always guaranteed to be there? No, because there's no way that you can absolutely say that. You know?
Right. And after a certain point in time, is that link going to be taken down so that you can't
Yeah.
even follow it back?
Mm-hmm. Or even if the link isn't taken down, we get to a point where we don't even have the technology to read the link anymore, like 25 years from now.
Right.
Even if the link is still active and you manage to find the thing to
Scan it.
scan it, yeah. Then you can see it, but you have to have all these. Oh, and then you have to make sure to have an old enough computer to be able to deal with the old technology of the scanner. You see
Right,
what
yeah.
I'm saying here? It'd be kind of like trying to pull a first appearance off of a laser disc nowadays. You know?
Well, and by the same token, you have the arguments that, like Marvel Age back in the 80s and
Mm-hmm.
90s, they would always put up an image of something that would be coming out in the near future, and so then you have a lot of people saying, well, here's the actual first appearance because they show the character and they talk about who the character is going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an advertisement or a preview or something, not in continuity. So then where does that fall as far as first appearances go
Well, look at your
also?
first appearance of Star Lord. I mean, that's a primary example of that one. It's in a preview. It's like legitimately basically a previews magazine that is
Right.
Star Lord's first appearance. And it counts. So why doesn't the Marvel Age count? And it's kind of like they call Wolverine naming himself and flying out of the jungle in full outfit a cameo appearance, but when you see the shadowed silhouette at the end of Jimmy Olsen 134 in a computer monitor, that counts as the first appearance of Darkseid.
Right.
It's like where are we drawing the line at, guys?
Well, and I know that this is the one that always gets under your skin.
Yeah.
X-Men Annual number 16
Oh yeah.
versus,
Gambit.
it's like what constitutes as a first appearance versus a cameo or a glimpse or, whatever. You
Yeah.
just,
There's what, 3 pages in that annual, if I remember right. 3 pages. He's named. He's showing fighting with the group, showing using his powers,
and
and
in
conversing with Cable. That's a cameo, apparently, huh?
apparently. Yeah, and so you have a lot of that. So I think that by and large, it's your heap versus pile, or what constitutes for one person may not for another, and so that's why there's the difference in these distinctions.
Well, and what's interesting to me, really looking at it, is even the same source doesn't have a consistent
No.
what is a cameo and what is. And I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, I use Overstreet because I mean it's been around forever, and I find it's a good, solid. Well, it's the most solid there is out there at this point, without getting into the volatility of speculation markets and stuff like that. That being said, there's no rhyme or reason to first versus cameos versus etc. in
Right.
that realm. So
Yeah, it's inconsistent and frustrating.
at best.
I bet.
So, but anyway, that's about all I've got to bitch about.
It really is. I will say that NYX did a really good job given where we are with the Marvel Mutant Society. We're in a transition, and anytime that you have a transition and a new status quo, nobody's happy, and so we're trying to find middle ground. This is actually taking a very hands-on, believable approach where you could talk about, you know, both, new to the area and, they're invading us versus, we just need a place to live. Why won't they let us in? And they're also talking about how being a mutant is not the only classification, for a person or the only aspect of a person. There are friends and family and religion and other aspects that make a person who they are. It's not just about that one characteristic of having a power. And so I think that there's a lot of room to touch on things and actually
Yeah.
open conversation and debate. I thought it was really well done. I'm not sure about the choicing characters, but again, for what they're trying to do, this may be the best route to do it, is having the variety that they have.
It looks, from what I'm looking at here on the cover, it looks like well, for lack of a better way of putting it, a diversity team.
Well, and the
Because
fact that they
you
haven't really
have
gotten along.
because what you have female, um, female with unique religion, if I remember correct. Homosexual on one, correct?
Two,
Two,
actually.
two of them. Okay, who else?
The two guys that are both gay.
Oh, okay. I only thought
Prodigy.
the Prodigy was, yeah. Okay.
Nope, Anola is also gay.
Okay. Um, so like I said, this is. It seems like they've tried to create a diversity team.
Well, and the thing that I think is also interesting is that these characters came out in like the 2005 era,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had others that came after that. We don't really have a long-term character that predates the year 2000. So this is going to be one of your younger cast.
And that's what they're going for. I think, to be quite honest, because they're trying to get a younger team. The audience they're trying to catch with this would not have understood bringing in what, North Star.
Yep.
Yeah. It had North Star been one
Right.
of them. You know, it, you know, what's Grandpa doing there? And so you see what's going on with it, and I understand. It makes complete sense. You are appealing to a younger market with a group that can touch, all the things that are kind of being talked about, quietly at this point, because there's either, you know, fear on one side or fear on the other. It doesn't matter how you look
Right.
at it.
So, this has great potential. I'm curious to see where it goes from here. Um, like I said, it wouldn't have been the cast that I would have thrown together,
Yeah.
but it works for what it's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the art was, down the middle. It wasn't any overly stylized, and
Yeah.
it's not, the old traditional style that I grew up with. It's kind of something in the middle. So it kind of it's driving down the middle of the road right now so that a lot of people can access it. But you know what they say about driving down the middle of the road?
Yeah.
You get hit from both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I guess going back to what I was saying, because I do have one more question on that. Where would X-23 fit into that? Just like female period, or
Well, she pumps up to dissuade Miss Marvel from what she's trying to do. She's like, you know,
so she's the voice of reason on the team.
yes.
Okay.
But so far, it's not a team. It's been people running into each other in an area.
And then, okay, and this is yet again because I don't keep up with Marvel near as much as I'm supposed to for having comic shop, but that's what I've got you for. Um, Miss Marvel is Muslim, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and isn't there a secondary thing for her besides just being Muslim and Middle Eastern?
Well, she is also an inhuman as well as being a mutant. The only time
That's what I was looking for, was the Inhuman thing. Okay. All right.
So we have a lot that we can work with on it.
Mhm.
So far, they've done a really good job of just kind of keeping it down the middle of the road and
Yeah.
not being. Um, they're not stepping on any toes. You can see where they're headed,
Mhm.
and I'm intrigued with it because again, with having a younger cast, like if you had an older, more experienced character, they were going to come into an area and have a different approach to being, new to the area than someone that's younger, coming into an area where you're trying to discover where you fit in and everything.
Yeah.
This is back at that time when you were concerned what other people thought, and so that does change the dynamic in there.
Well, it does, because I mean, if you think about the very early X-Men, that's what the team was. It was much younger, late teens, and they did care about what people thought.
Which
So,
actually is addressed in this book, but I'm just going to leave it at that for right
okay.
now, and suggest that if you're new into the X-Men universe, this would definitely be one of the titles that I would recommend for integrating yourself in instead
Yeah.
of the main titles that they have put out.
Okay.
So at that point, we'll we'll check in soon for the next week's stuff, which will probably be in the next like 3 days.
Yeah, yeah. I think we record that in 2 days. So.
So, but otherwise, then a week from today, we got Sam Jones.
Yeah. Yep. Sam J. Jones is going to be in my front lawn. That's going to be kind of fun.
We'll have to keep smelling salts around for Devin.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be good. I found some neat stuff to put together memory items with on that one. So.
But come on down, and we'll love to see you. But until next time, Devin and Jeff from the Ark, and we'll talk to you later.